no one. So it's kind of exciting in a political movement way. I feel like I'm kind of doing something I don't know anybody that's ever done this like that before.
Well, because usually how the city works is whoever wins the primary pretty much wins.
Yeah.
And then it's the state and the county positions
Yeah.
where it's like you have to battle with whoever holds the seat if they're running again.
Yeah. Kind of a formality kind of going on there. I got the idea somewhat from Brooke Jackson, who ran front man.
Yeah.
She didn't tell me to do whatever. She just pointed out, well, yeah, I mean, it's still going to be on there. There's room for a writing candidate, I think, is what she was saying. But then I watched this movie, Rooster Julianne. He does none of the above. It's this camping. So I was watching that one and I was like, well, that sounds fun. It's only, what, $12 to start a website and you got someone that'll build it.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to this community work event. This is Bryn, my partner, and I'm Clifford. We appreciate you making the trek to our backyard. Basically, the purpose of this event is to connect you with community organizers, leaders, and people who are just putting in work. We're in a pretty transformational stage in our city, and we have a lot of energy in our community to actually make real change. And I really believe that we are in a special moment in the city, having grown up here. And I hope that you can grab something from one of the speakers today that you can do. Part of bringing the variety of speakers that we have is so that you can find something that works for you, because we all work in different manners. We all have different means or different resources or different skills that we can contribute, but I think we can all contribute. And I hope this isn't the last one of these. It may not be in my backyard, but I hope that as you have this experience, maybe you can share it. Maybe you can encourage others to find ways they can get involved. Because each of you are here, but you represent a bigger part of the community that isn't here. And so I hope you connect with them. I hope you bring to them some of the things you learned today and then are willing to keep working. I mean, it's a lot of work. And I'm sure for those who have been involved or those who are looking to get involved, I'm sure you're aware of that. But see this turnout. Look at this. And then look at the people going out and marching, putting together other events. We can do this. We can really make substantial changes in our community. I'm really excited to see all of you, and I'm happy you're here.
I just want to say thank you for coming, and I'm happy to have you here, and we'll definitely keep working together, and I am excited for that.
So before I introduce our first speaker, I do want to acknowledge Amanda, who's out here to interpret. One of the most important things we can do is look at ways we can make this work accessible to everyone in our community, whether it's ensuring that the work is in different languages, or we find different ways to explain how we can get people involved. So our first speaker is slightly different from our agenda. Christopher Young. Christopher Young is with Transform Salem. He has a variety of initiatives let him explain, that's why I brought him here.
Thank you. Thank you to our hosts. Give them a quick round of applause. Opening up their beautiful backyard to us. Fantastic. My name is Chris Young. I am a lifelong resident of Salem, and as I always say, I'm very proud that I am a fourth-generation resident of Salem. Been here more years than I will admit on a live stream. I love this city, especially the Highland neighborhood. I grew up off of the Salem Parkway. I went to Highland. My parents went to Highland. Aunts, uncles, cousins, best friends. We all went to Highland. I actually have a Highland Hawk tattoo. That tells you how much I love that neighborhood. It's where my heart will always be. I don't live there anymore. We moved to a different part of town. But school, Chemeketa Community College, and the Harvard of Polk County, Western Oregon University. As I always say, we're the only college in Polk County, so we can say whatever we want. I did have a brief stint in Kaiser, a little bit of Whitaker Middle School. We won't talk about those dark days of my life. When you're on the Salem Parkway, you kind of hug Kaiser schools and Whitaker, McNary, what have you. I guess now it's Claggett Creek. I'm aging myself, but at one point in time, I was a law student at Willamette. I chose to not go that route because I wanted to chase my passion in public policy and pursuing justice. So that's kind of how I got involved with stuff that we're doing now in Salem. Historically, I've been a social justice activist since 1998, and mostly helped people in other states. They would have really bad things that would happen, and we realized really early on that if we could bring attention to those things, maybe it would yield change. And so we started making websites, we started making petitions, started making the social media accounts and such, realizing that as long as I had Wi-Fi and a keyboard, which I'd imagine many of you do as well, you could do a lot. And that's not to say that doing things in person isn't worthwhile, because it absolutely is. But you could do a lot from home in your sweatpants or however you decide to dress in your laundry room, which is what I do. As Clifford mentioned, I am part of what we call the Transform Salem Project. That is a very official sounding thing for something that's not official at all. It's basically just more of a concept. I mean, Salem needs to be transformed. There's a lot of good things in Salem, and there's a lot of things that aren't that good. And so we need to transform the things that are bad into things that are good. Pretty simple, right? And so the Transform Salem Project is basically just a bunch of policy nerds. Some of us live in Salem, some of us live elsewhere, but all of us have a desire to see Salem be a better city. We are not for creating leaders. We're here to support the good ones that are already out there, like Jackie, for instance, on the Salem City Council. And I see that Julianne Jackson walked in the house, the legend. And so I've been seeing her on all types of big media outlets out there. And so our desire with Transform Salem is to support those people that are already out there doing the good work. We saw a need, some people are doing this over here, or organizations doing that over there, and all of it is worthwhile, but we felt that there needed to be something in between to help kind of tie it all together, to provide some glue to the situation. So that's the Transform Salem Project in a nutshell from a theory. Some of the projects that we work on, one thing that we do each Friday, and by we, I mean me, it's about the lowest quality production you'll ever find, but we're doing civic engagement workshops. We've done it the last 2 Fridays on the lawn of Salem First United Methodist Church. The reason why we chose that location, the church is open and affirming and welcoming to everyone in every way, and it's private property, right? So we got a lot of these trolls coming around here. I mean, that was one thing when I got here. I was like, oh my gosh, there's not even a chance of trolls, right? Alex, the MAGA guy, is not even going to come here and try to ram his views down our throat or whatever. That's a really foreign concept. And so I chose that location, but now it's time to hit the streets. So tomorrow we will be at West Salem Park, commonly referred to as Safeway Park in West Salem. I didn't even know it was West Salem Park. I've always called it Safeway Park, and then I had to go there to grab a picture for the Facebook event. I was like, oh my goodness, it's got a name. But my goal is to meet people where they're at, and I don't want to go where there's hills. I want to go where the land is flat, because that's where, in my mind, the greatest need is. That's where I grew up, and I know there wasn't a lot of people coming around telling us how to be involved at the city level or county level or state level. It was basically like, don't get in trouble. And if you do get in trouble, then you get to go to Center Street by here and chop wood, like I always had to do when I was a juvenile delinquent. And so it's our hope that we talk to other people to prevent them from ever having to go there and do things like that. And so we're going to be going to probably other locations like North Salem High School's lawn, somewhere around McKay High School, Bush Elementary School, places like that. Each week is going to have probably a different topic with maybe some repeats. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about student resource officers. It's an issue that a lot of people are looking into right now, reevaluating whether or not school resource officers should be in Salem Kaiser schools. I certainly don't think so. I went to high school in the 90s, and little did I know that's kind of when that all started. I was in middle school in the mid 90s and then high school in the later 90s, and I just knew that there was always cops at school. I didn't know why, and it was weird, and they would awkwardly stand next to us and intimidate us, and we're like, well, we didn't even do anything wrong. Why are you over here? Don't you got something else you could be doing? So that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, and then every Friday until it starts raining again, we're going to be somewhere. So if you go to the Transform Salem Facebook page, you'll see those events pop up, and I encourage everyone to come out. Another thing that we do is we make websites. So, what would have been 8 years ago, we got the idea for the Oregon Attorney General race to, there was two candidates. There was Ellen Rosenblum, who is the Attorney General now, and she was going up against this individual named Dwight Holton, the infamous. And he's the son of a Virginia governor and brother-in-law to Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's running mate. And so he's very much, part of the establishment and very pro-law enforcement. All of his campaigns was him walking with law enforcement, and they're all suited up, which in itself is a campaign violation, but I digress. And so we were trying to figure out a way, well, how can we bring attention to how horrible he is and how great Ellen is? And so we came up with notdwightholton.com and beatdwightholton.com. And we just put we never put anything out there that wasn't already publicly available. What we learned was, well, if you got to go to this platform to find this, and this website to find that, and this news article to find that, most people aren't going to spend that time to go and hunt all that information down. And if you're one of the people that's trying to explain to someone else, well, no, go over here, go over here, go over there. I always say you look like on that meme. I want to say it's like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where the guy's like got a cigarette in his hand. He's got this like chart behind him with all these lines, and he just looks crazy. You kind of come across like that if you're trying to tell people, look at all this stuff on the internet. They're like, I don't want to look at all that. You're nuts. And so we figured that if we put it all on one website, that it makes it easier to retrieve, makes it easier to follow, makes it easier to share. And when we first got involved in that Attorney General race, Ellen Rosenblum was down 6 to 7% in the polls, depending on which one you look at, and she ended up winning by a landslide. And by no means am I saying that our websites deserve all the credit, because we don't, because Ellen was a phenomenal candidate, but it definitely helped. And I know that it made Dwight Holton really mad, and he might be watching this live stream and be like, that's the guy. So if I go missing, it's probably Dwight Holton that did it. Don't let them say that Hillary Clinton did it. That's what I always tell people if I go up missing. Anyhow, the websites that we've created is reformsalempd.com, which was the first one that we created because of obviously everything that had gone on, and Salem PD's just never-ending desire to try to create a narrative that's not based in reality. I'm going to take my glasses off because they get all fogged up. That's what happens when I talk. I'm full of passion, and the heat just radiates off my face. But anyhow, yeah, Salem PD, as they always do. Salem PD, the school board, some members of the city council, not all, and other leaders around this area will have historically always gotten away with stuff. Something bad would happen. They would spin something up with their public relations department. Local media would take it hook, line, and sinker if they covered it at all, and then it just got buried. Well, those days are gone. If something bad happens, you can pretty much guarantee there's going to be a website that's going to come out that is going to call it out and put all the publicly available information in one place. And so with Reform Salem PD, we got a tab for student resource officers. We got a tab for what happened on July 4th. The homepage is dedicated to what happened between May 30th and June 1st. And there's a tab on there that's a rebuttal to Chief Moore's a memo. I don't know what you want to call it. It was not good. But that's one of those things where he comes out with the memo with just a bunch of misleading things, if not just outright lies. And, he needs to be checked on that. And so that's what we did on that website. You could go check it out, reformsalempd.com. There's resignmartyhyan.com. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the school board. Salem Kaiser School Board is overran with people that I would describe as being racist. That's my personal opinion. Of course, if you were to ask them, they'd be like, well, that's not racist. Yeah, I said all these racist things and I did all this racism stuff, but what, that makes me a racist, you know? Well, I'm entitled to my opinion, and my opinion is that some of those people are racist. They do racist things. And so Marty Hine, at the time that we created the website, was the chairperson for the Salem-Keizer School Board. And if you go to resignmartyhine.com, you can see all the reasons why Marty Hine should not be not only not the chairperson, which thank goodness she's not anymore, but not on the school board at all. She is not representative of her zone 2 of the school board. The way the school board is elected in Salem-Keizer Schools rather, is it's not like the city council where you only get a vote for your zone. It's at large. It's the entire school district. So, as I always say, if the West Salem Hills want someone, and the Sprague Hills want someone, and the McNary Meadows, or whatever it's called out there in the more affluent part of Keizer, and all those are the same people, they want that same person, well, that's who gets elected. It's not who Zone 2 wants. It's who all these other people want. And there's a really, really kind of clandestine effort out there that has really affected the school board to where they're getting enormous campaign contributions that all come from the same political action committees and players and donors that fund terrible state lawmakers and such. And the school board is supposed to be nonpartisan positions. It's not supposed to be Republican. It's not supposed to be Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, whatever. It's nonpartisan, and it's supposed to be that way for a reason. We're talking about kids. It's not about carrying out your political agenda. It's about carrying out your agenda for what's best for children. And so that website is dedicated to Marty Hine resigning. She has adamantly said that she will not. Well, then the website keeps going. If you Google Marty Hine's name, that Google footprint gets less favorable by the day, thank goodness. And another website we created is notchuckbennett.com. I'm sure there's probably some Chuck Bennett fans somewhere out there, not here and not at my house, but somewhere, presumably. And he has not really called out anybody that's been doing terrible things. Not Salem PD, not what I call the armed shampoo protectors that have been roaming around town. He just kind of does his jovial interviews once a week or whatever and acts like everything's so great. And I'm sure for some people it is great, but for a lot of people it's not. And so I'm not asking for Chuck Bennett to resign, but I am asking for him to do better. And Not Chuck Bennett is something that I'm going to be writing in November. I don't know that we would have enough oomph, so to speak, to get a write-in candidate to win, but I know that I'm going to have kind of a protest vote. Chuck Bennett's going to be appearing on the November ballot by himself with a write-in spot, and I'm writing not Chuck Bennett as kind of a protest vote to encourage him to do better because he is terrible. We got other websites on the way. Those are 3 websites that we've started. The same day I bought those 3 websites, I bought 22 other ones, if that kind of tells you where this is headed. One's dedicated to some members of the city council, maybe another one for the mayor, we'll see. Definitely for the school board. Salem PD, we probably got covered with that one, but I reserve the right to start more. State legislature. We don't necessarily plan on focusing on federal stuff, but we reserve the right to do so. So federal lawmakers better be on the right side of history. And then we also have started petitions. The first petition that I ever started on change.org was for my friend Clifford Robinson. I don't know if we have any Blazer fans in the house. Uncle Cliffy, a.k.a. Uncle Spliffy. Fantastic human, far taller and better looking than I am. He was subjected to a terrible racial profiling incident in 1997. He was going to play paintball with his brother and some of his friends. Someone, in not so shockingly fashion, called the cops. Got a bunch of African-American men riding around with assault rifles. They even knew that it was Clifford Robinson. They knew that he had played in the NBA for 8 years and made it sound like he was about to go rob a 7-Eleven with his brother and his friends. So he gets barricaded down on the waterfront, paramilitary style, and then the cops find out Well, lo and behold, he's got paintball guns, and they had to figure out a way to kind of, get the egg off their face and cover up the horrific judgment that they just exerted. And so they found a tiny little piece of cannabis in his car, which wasn't even within his reach. And rather than let someone else take the fall for the personal amount of cannabis, which at the time was not even illegal, they pinned it on Cliff. And so the story got buried. It was no longer about Clifford Robinson being the victim of a racial profiling incident. It was about Clifford Robinson smoking that giggle bush again. He's out there smoking that enchanted salad. And so therefore that was the story. Well, then almost 23 years goes by and people forget about it. Well, as I told some news outlets, the person it happens to doesn't forget about it. That's a traumatic experience. That's gonna harm them for the rest of their lives. And so I got the idea, well, let's start a petition. And you will note that Clifford Robinson is also the same individual that Salem School Board member Paul Kylo used his face in the infamous school board meeting. So you're probably like, why are you talking for so long? It all kind of ties in, oddly enough. And so when I started that petition, we succeeded. What we were ultimately calling for was Ted Wheeler to issue an apology on behalf of the city of Portland and clear the record of what happened that day. And we didn't get the best apology, but we did get an apology. And so the petition worked. I was like, oh my gosh, now I'm addicted to this, right? Anytime I can think of some type of injustice, I'm going to start a petition. And then so I did. I started the resignmartyhyan.com petition. I started a petition asking for Ellen Rosenblum to investigate the city of Salem for everything that went on between May 30th and June 1st. And then recently I started a petition calling for some members of the Salem City Council, not all, we got some good ones out there, but for the ones that are questionable, we will say, for them to pursue the Salem PD audit completely in a fair and transparent manner. So those are some of the petitions that we've started. I did have another petition calling for Chuck Bennett to endorse a third-party investigation, and then he kind of did on July 13th, which was in some ways satisfying because he did the right thing, but kind of not that satisfying because I just started the petition 2 days earlier. But, a win is a win, so we'll take it. Started 2 YouTube channels, the Transform Salem YouTube channel and then the Concerned Citizen YouTube channel. Concerned Citizen is dedicated to some transgressions, we will call them, in the Salem-Keizer area when leaders do bad things. And then Transform Salem is for when good things happen. So, you want to separate them out. You don't want to have the good things mixed in with the racists and shampoo protectors, right? And so we're also very active on various social media platforms. Some of them we're looking for help. Again, I don't even want to say we're a volunteer run organization because we're not even an organization. But if you have a passion for Twitter or a passion for Instagram, I do not really have a passion for those two. Twitter a little bit, but Instagram, I always say I got a face for Reddit. So Instagram's never been my thing. Now that I've taken up probably more time than you had originally thought I would, I'll give you some calls to action, then I will pass the microphone. One thing you'll learn about me, I'm a microphone hog. Don't ever go to karaoke night with me. You'll never get to sing. So some calls to action. Number 1, sign and share petitions. Not just the petitions that I named. Jonathan from Epilogue's got a great petition. Luce has a great petition. My friend Pedro has a good petition. The petition calling for a higher level of education for officers if they want to be a sworn officer. Jonathan's is for requiring not only requiring body cameras by Salem PD, but policies in place for when that doesn't happen, right? You could be like, oh, I'm wearing 9 body cameras. I turned them all off before you accidentally fell and broke 9 of your bones. But so you have to have a policy behind that. Those are all great petitions. Luce is calling for to get student resource officers out, to get Marty Hine and Paul Kylo to resign. Very fantastic organizations, support everything they do. A reminder to attend the Friday workshops that we put on. The first one, I think we had 5 people. And then the next one we had 10 people. I'm hoping that we have at least 11 tomorrow. We'll find out. And even if there's 1, that's fine. I specifically planned it for Friday nights because I know that if you're there on a Friday night, you really, really care, and you really, really want to get involved. And not to say that other things aren't worthwhile, because they absolutely are, but I'd rather have, 5 really passionate policy nerds than a small army of people that are like, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back. So, and then last, but certainly not least, is to support businesses owned by people of color. It's a really, really important thing. I'm not saying just because a business isn't owned by a person of color that you shouldn't support them, but there's a lot of just terrible businesses in Salem, and when you give them your dollars, they're going to give them to other terrible people, and some of those terrible people are going to protect shampoo with assault rifles, or they're going to be in positions of power, get elected somewhere or whatever, and that's no good. We want those dollars to go to people that it's actually going to help, that are going to do good things with those dollars, and that are going to make Salem a better place. So for the rest of the speakers, I want to apologize that I did not bring a microphone stand. I gave it to my godson, and then I kind of forgot, and then I pulled this stuff out of the attic. So the microphone will be down here on the ground, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Christopher. Our next speakers are going to be Kay Jones and Dr. Lara Knudsen with Alluvium Mobile Health Team.
All right. Hi, everyone. Let's see. So, just wanted to come out and say hi and hear what folks were saying here tonight. Hey there. You probably saw our vehicle out at the protest, and we just when I first saw everyone coming out there, my first thought was, I hope all of those beautiful people don't get sick. So. I guess happy to report, we just sort of wanted to tell you some of the stuff going on with coronavirus right now. There's been no connection between cases and to the demonstrations outside. As it turns out, as we've learned, being outside with masks is a relatively safe way to be with people right now. So that's a pretty good thing to hear about. We do testing right now. Testing is the thing that we're sort of up to our eyeballs in Marion and Polk counties, and possibly some other places in the state in the upcoming weeks. What we are focusing on is we're trying to get testing access to groups of people who are either experiencing a higher disease burden right now, or groups of people or places that are generally experiencing a higher disease burden. So, for instance, in Marion County right now, the areas of Jervis and Woodburn and Hubbard, North Marion County, that's where there are higher disease burden in those areas, and the Pacific Islander community is experiencing disproportionate burden of the disease, and also so are the Latinx folks. So, like in the past couple weeks, we've done drive-through testing events, and then also walk-up testing events. We've done them in the Pacific Islander community, and then also with Colonia Libertad, and Vicky over here. We just met Vicky at Colonia Libertad a couple weeks ago. She works with Mano a Mano, and I guess I could let Mickey talk about that if you want to later. But I didn't know Vicky was going to be here, and she just happened to sit behind us. So I figured if you want to, you could just say what it was like to have us come out there, and yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Yes, I'm Vicky Falcon Vasquez. I work with Mano a Mano Family Center, which is one of the oldest Latino organizations here in Salem, more than 30 years. And we wanted to offer this to the community because as Kay was saying, Latinx community are the most disproportionately impacted right now, and we work with the most vulnerable communities, which are also farm workers. And so at Colonia Libertad, which is part of Farm Worker Housing Development Corporation, there's a lot of people who are in the front lines right now working. And we have been pushing pretty heavily, advocating for this information to be inclusive and to also be in Spanish. And Alluvium was so kind to come out and give out free testing. And it was a challenge because there was a lot of, the community was scared. They were scared that they were going to get actually infected just because we don't really trust in certain entities sometimes. Like we don't even want to go to the doctor, or we don't even want to go to the police, because in our countries a lot of times these people of authority have violated that authority. So, and a lot of times we also have to look into the legal situation of a person that makes them scared. And what we're saying is that we have rights. We have rights as human rights. And we need access. And that we are a community, that we work together. So Alluvium was kind. They were able to explain. We were able to explain to people. Our partnership, I think it's great because we understand our community. And then we act as that mediator too. So we were able to translate the forms and register people. Just because there's also sometimes there's no access to understanding how to fill out a registration form online. So, and then they were just amazing. So amazing to work with. We are just so grateful that they are continuing to support us. We're going to put on more events because more and more people kept asking where they could get tested. And just because, again, it's people that are going to work every day. And a lot of times their work situation is not the best. So thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Yeah, and I working with Mano a Mano, we were very impressed with Vicky and the whole team there. I think that's something that when we first started doing this stuff, I was hoping that we would get out into all of the different communities that we have here in Salem, and that they would help us build it. And I think the work with Vicky and Mano a Mano was definitely us going there improved our process by working with Vicky. And this Saturday we have an event coming up with the Pacific Islanders, and where's that? Since this is on the live feed, I'm not sure if people might be seeing it at People's Church, which is in Northeast Salem. And Jackie helped to put that together. I think Jackie went to the county put us together, and then we've been working on that. So I think perhaps one thing I could talk about, I don't know if you want to talk about the need for volunteering as it comes up. No, you want me to keep talking? Okay, fine. So we're a volunteer organization. We just got started in March, and so this experience has been eye-opening to get right close up against the government response, which we just haven't been prepared. So now we are right up there, arm in arm with the public health department in Marion and Polk counties, trying to work with what we have. And so we do these scheduled outreach events, but then also as outbreaks come up, we like to try to get out to, if it's a workplace or a shelter, the houseless shelters, if they have an outbreak or something like that, we get in there and try and do testing all at once. As you can imagine, it's hard. Like, we need a large volunteer base to call out for on-call help. So you can go to our website at alluv.org/volunteer volunteer, or if you just go to alluv.org, there's volunteer buttons all over the place. And we're still working on our process to make sure that we get back to you quickly and all that sort of thing. So just give us some time. We're this is what we're doing for 14 hours in the day, each day of the week. But as we are coming into the fall, I think it will be really helpful if we did have a whole cadre of volunteers that we can call on, because we're probably going to need that as flu season comes. Jonathan put a call out, I know, a while ago, and I still haven't contacted everyone. So if Jonathan put a call out and I haven't contacted you, please know that you're on a list of my things to do, and I want to hear from you and talk to you. But the volunteers that Jonathan sent to us have been really wonderful, and I'm sure you all are here, and I'm guessing we would probably get the same result there. So I think one thing, I guess we'll take a little bit of time. If anyone does have any questions about, there's one more thing, which, so everyone's asking us, what are you going to do after COVID, post-COVID, and post-COVID makes as much sense to me right now as post-racial. But that's perhaps because of my proximity to it. But we have been approached about possibly doing something like Cahoots in Eugene. United Way was considering doing something like that, and we've been talking with them. It's all very preliminary, but if you have an interest in mental health crisis response, then I guess once again, go on the volunteer portion of our website and just put your name in there so that so I can have a pool of people I can call on later and say, okay, you're interested. What would you like to do? Or maybe I'll have something for you to do at that time. But right now it's just talking. And like I said, we are very, very busy with the COVID stuff. But if any of you know a mental health provider who would be passionate about changing who comes out when there's some sort of a mental health crisis, as opposed to the police, have a trained social worker and a paramedic to come out. If you know someone who might be passionate about that, who could possibly join our board and sort of lead that part of what we do, please contact me. You can contact me, K, just the letter K, at alluv.org, or info@alluv.org is another one. So I guess those last bits. I wanted to open it up. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just had a question. So I know you said, either like a psychologist or somebody. Would you guys also be interested in like QMHAs, QMHPs, kind of lower rung, I guess? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question was whether we would also be interested in kind of mid-level mental health providers, and absolutely. If you know some folks, send them our way.
Yeah, and like I said, and that would be to help with the planning, sort of the foundational. What would it look like? That's where we are to some degree. Like I said, United Way's done a lot of work on this already, but then how would it look if we, Alluvium, and whoever else is with us, how would that look? That's still to be determined. So I figured we've got it. This is sort of something we do, at these events that we do at the testing events. We try to make a doctor available, and so we've got a doctor here, MD. Lara also has a master's in public health. So if you all have any questions about the coronavirus, or I guess that's probably it. But the coronavirus, or questions about the public health response or something like that, I guess just raise your hand and we can take a little bit of time for that. So, yeah.
Can you give your contact information again?
Yeah, so I am K, just the letter K, at alluv.org.
Can you give an example of the sort of work that a volunteer might expect to do for you?
Yeah.
Sure. So we have a few different roles for volunteers depending on their interest and their background and that type of thing. When we have volunteers who are physicians or nurse practitioners, then we often will plug them into these testing events for answering questions from the public. We'd go to outreach events with the houseless, and we do medical visits, not just for coronavirus, but for urgent care type things. We have a lot of volunteers who are nurses and paramedics or have some kind of medical background, and they're usually the ones who are actually swabbing at the test events. And then we have a lot of volunteers who don't have any medical background, who we are very grateful for all of the detaily things that go into a testing event. Both during the testing event itself, all of our swabbers have what we call a swab mate, who actually has to be very detail oriented and make sure that all the labels and the name and date of birth and all that stuff matches and that everything's done correctly so that the lab processes the specimens we send in. We also have volunteers who are involved more on the admin side, managing our patient registration, our spreadsheets, making sure the computers and the printers are working during the events and that type of thing. We have volunteers that assist us when we do an event where a lot of people end up testing positive. We get the results a few days later, and then we have to call each of those people and let them know that they have coronavirus. There's a lot of information that we try to get across in those calls, and we have so when we tell people that they're positive, we try to let them know what that means, how long they need to quarantine or self-isolate, what their household members need to do, how they can try to protect their household members. And we try to plug them in with some of the existing resources for things like rent and utility assistance, food bank deliveries, and we really could use more volunteer assistance too as kind of a patient navigator, like to help people navigate those systems. It's one thing to just say, like, here's a program that helps with rent and utilities, here's the phone number, but for somebody to actually, especially in another language, navigate that system and the application and everything that goes into it, it's really time intensive. It's often on the phone with an interpreter, so we use volunteers for that type of thing, and could use more for sure. And then we also have volunteers who are helping us with just like getting our systems in place, and sometimes it's as simple as here's our checklist of all the things that we need for this event on Saturday. Can you go down to our ambulance and make sure everything's in there, make sure it's all set and ready to go, so there's kind of a whole scale of activities depending on what someone's interest and background is.
Yeah, and I think one of the things which if someone has interest and background in communicating on social media and everything, neither Lara and I have Facebook accounts, and we don't know how to use it. So if someone is interested in basically telling our story, I think there's a new volunteer who came through, Jonathan, Mickey Trowbridge, who does the yoga beer stuff, but she's in the midst of helping us organize our volunteer system, but also kind of tell our story to volunteers. So if you like to sort of get stories out there, you can come and hang out with us and tell some story. So.
And just two things I would say. One is that I think one thing that's been exciting for us in our work around coronavirus is because we're a new organization and we're not actually affiliated with anybody in the healthcare system. We came together in March as a group of small private practice docs and nurse practitioners. We all have tiny private practices in town, came together and made this group. And I think because we're not really affiliated with these bigger systems, it's been easier for us to be very nimble and flexible in responding to the pandemic and just seeing what we think needs to be done, who's not being reached, how do we go out there, how do we do it. And we've been surprised by how much the counties and even the state are turning to us to say, what's your testing strategy? Who do we need to test? Where should we go? How do we do this? We've been surprised again and again, especially the more time that goes on, how much there's not a lot of testing strategy already sorted out at all those levels of government, and how much we have kind of become this body that people turn to ask about that. And so I think it's an organization where if people are interested and passionate and want to help out with the pandemic, you can jump in and be busy right away. And actually, I think we're influencing some of the strategies that are happening across the county and even to some degree at a state level. The second thing I want to say is just in regards to this idea of doing something like Cahoots in Salem. Obviously, right now there's a lot of political will and energy and motivation around that idea. There's also a lot of money that's floating around there. I think in our organization, there's a lot of interest in something like that existing in Salem, but it's kind of a matter of capacity. Like right now, we are swimming in COVID and doing our best to get the care out there that people need. If there was a group of people who kind of materialized and said, hey, we're really passionate about this, we want to help organize it, we want to make this happen, we want to be involved, we have the structured, we have sort of the umbrella to be able to say, okay, well, like let's do this, let's research this and look into it, and there are groups that want to give us money and support in order for that to happen. And I'm hopeful that we can take advantage of this set of circumstances while it still exists, even though we're too busy to make it happen on our own. So I guess that's just my plug. If you all know folks who really would like something like Cahoots here in Salem, people call the police, someone's having a mental health crisis and it's not the police who show up, please get in touch with us. We would love to make that happen.
I guess the last thing I'll just say, because there's a new slogan we came up with, which is one to get out there, which is for love of family, get a test. For love of neighbors, wear a mask. For love of country, seek answers.
Chris, what can I spray without damaging this? We've got some sanitizer.
Lather it up, man. Yeah, do whatever. We got a backup.
It's not like a live.
Yeah. No worries.
All right. Our next speaker will be Rian Gayle. He is a commissioner on the Oregon Disabilities Commission, as well as the assistant director of Access and Inclusion for the Office of Disability Services at WU. And you may have seen him around if you've been out at the protests. He's also being an effort to coordinate additional ASL interpreters. So if you do have an event upcoming, and I'm sure he can speak more to that effort as well.
The interpreter was thirsty. I had to let her get a drink first. Hi, everyone. My name is Rian Gayle, and I am an advocate. I live here in Salem, Oregon, and as was shared, I am on the Oregon Disability Commission, and what I do is I advocate for economic and social and political justice for people with disabilities here in Salem. As a disability advocate, I am fighting against racism and ableism. Often people talk about mental health. And for a person with disabilities or for a Black person, typically that talk is about when an incident has already occurred and the police have been called. But not many people talk about what happens before that. How can people access those services before a crisis happens? And many mental health services here in Oregon are not designed for people who are Black or people of color or people with disabilities. So for me, for example, if I show up and I need access to mental health services, I have to ask if they provide an interpreter. Typically the answer is no, we don't have a budget to pay for an interpreter. And unfortunately, you have to set that up in advance. But many of the time, they don't do that. Also, a lot of Black people feel uncomfortable with someone who is not Black. You don't have a shared experience, a shared understanding of who I am. And it's not just about Black people, but it's about, Black trans people compared to white trans people. People who are Black with disabilities have different needs than white people with disabilities. There's a lot of intersections that go unmet. So when I talk about ableism, which is discrimination against people with disabilities, it's when an able-bodied person is given preference over someone who is disabled. For example, a deaf person doesn't have access to information if there's no sign language interpreter or captioning provided. If there's someone who is deaf and blind, then they also have a lack of access, both visually and audially. And people don't really think about access to information and what that means. It's about language. And a lot of really important information is difficult to find. You have to go to a library that's maybe not within your neighborhood. They may have a paywall that's expensive before you can access that information. And even if you get through all those barriers and you're able to access, the language isn't accessible, too academic, very specific to a group of people. Can someone with a mental health issue access that? If maybe someone's dyslexic, maybe someone has ADD. The ability to process and digest that information is a barrier. If someone's trying to understand their rights and how that fits in with the Constitution, for example, that's a barrier. If people don't have access to the internet, that's another barrier. And sometimes the people who write the information is coming from a white, rich, privileged, educated perspective, which means they're going to use terminology and language that is not commonly used in communities. Therefore, anyone trying to understand that information will struggle to do that. And it doesn't mean that those people aren't smart. That's not it at all. You can be educated and still not have that information. So recently I met with the police department and I asked them if they had any policies or directives specifically for people with disabilities. For example, if someone is arrested, how would they be able to communicate? Would their hands be cuffed in front as opposed to behind? And historically, the police do not read them their Miranda rights. If a deaf person is arrested, for example, oh, you don't have an interpreter? Well, we'll just withhold that information, and usually they're detained up to 2 to 3 days sometimes before they even have their rights read to them through a sign language interpreter. So I asked the police department, is that information accessible? Where can I find that information? And the answer I typically get is, oh, it's out there somewhere. And when they say that, it means it's not accessible. And when you finally do find that information, good luck translating that. You have to stop and think, oh, what does that word mean? Wait, where would I find this additional information that's now required? It becomes a very complicated process. And the police officers know that a person who is disabled, a black person or a person of color, usually does not know their rights. And they take advantage of that lack of knowledge and manipulate them to get information to further detain or imprison them. So if I got arrested and they were asking me questions without a sign language interpreter present, I would not understand what was going on. I could misunderstand something, and they could use that to their advantage to put me in jail. And even some white people struggle with access. It's not just a black disabled person that struggles with access. Anyone can have an issue with literacy. And here in the state of Oregon, here in Salem, I'm sure you've seen me. I've gone to several protests. Maybe you've noticed that sometimes I've gone without a sign language interpreter because it's extremely difficult to find someone who is available, especially if it's last minute. If there's a protest organized and I only have 2 days to find an interpreter, not everyone is going to be available. So I show up, but I do not have that access. And of course, you know, people are friendly. They're trying to text back and forth and communicate with me, and I do really appreciate that. But at the same time, people need access to information. What if there was an emergency or an escalation? What if the Proud Boys showed up and there was an altercation? I wouldn't be able to understand what was happening. And unfortunately, many of the Black interpreters here in the state work pro bono. There aren't enough funds to pay for the work that they do. So when we talk about defunding the police and investing in community, that means some money needs to go towards accessibility. There needs to be funds available to pay for interpreters so that someone who is experiencing a mental health crisis would have an interpreter available to match their language needs. And if I got arrested and I had to go to court, well, what happened then? Would I be able to find a qualified interpreter? An interpreter who understands my background and my language? Even a Black person who is not deaf. Research has shown that in court settings, transcribers often incorrectly interpret what they say because they're speaking in a Black dialect or their Black lingo. And that's a form of discrimination because they haven't found someone who's culturally competent to meet their needs. So last year I was working with the city of Salem, and I was making sure that public information would be accessible to the deaf community. So our requirement that we passed was an ordinance for all public spaces to have captioning on the television. So if you're going to a restaurant and you notice there's no captioning on, they're in violation of that ordinance. By law, they are supposed to be on. So this year, I'm again talking with the city of Salem, which is a huge thank you to Jonathan for being a part of that process. And our focus this time is what information do you need to have in mind when you first meet a deaf individual? The information they currently have is very old, outdated, and incorrect. That information still includes a TTY. Oh, if you meet a deaf person, then you're going to have to find a TTY. Does anyone know what that is? You do. TTY is old technology. You'd have like a large keyboard, very bulky, and you'd have to have a phone that you'd put on the top of it and connect to an operator. Nowadays, with the way technology has advanced, nobody uses TTY. So I'm working with them to change that information to become more updated and accessible to the deaf community. If someone is arrested, they need to be read their Miranda rights. However, they need that. You need to find an interpreter. You need to have interpreters on call to show up. If you don't have interpreters, what are some other avenues that you could use in order to communicate? Maybe a phone app. You could write back and forth on a piece of paper. Don't give up so easily. Oh, there's no interpreter. Too bad for you, deaf person. Now you have to be detained without having your rights read to you. We're also working on developing their information in having videos in sign language that we would be able to share with different organizations led by deaf people so they could have access in their language. Now, what about Black people? Are we trying to get information translated for the Black community so that it's accessible for them? Most Black people Do they know, that how they learn about their rights and police brutality and those experiences is expressed through rap music and hip hop? That's how we learn about the police and my rights, is by listening to music. But what about other ways that we can do that? Do people understand what access is? And not everyone in the Black community listens to rap music. So we need to be thinking about different ways to engage our community with that information. Also working with Disability Rights Oregon in order to make sure that their voting information is also accessible. In 2016, we found that 60% of voting polls were inaccessible. They didn't have wheelchair ramps. They didn't have information on the screen, or it's too small. They didn't have large print, so it was unreadable for people with low vision. And guess who was most impacted by that? Black people. Black people, the disabled community specifically, were the most impacted. And when we talk about voting fraud and this misnomer that that'll happen more often if you have voting by mail, they don't talk about the inaccessibility. If you don't do it by mail and you have it in person, then you're excluding a large population of people. If you're sick and you're immune compromised and you're not able to leave your home, then you have been excluded from the voting process. So my goal is to make that more inclusive. And Oregon has the opportunity to have a mail-in ballot, unlike some other states, unfortunately, which don't allow that at all. Another good example is about the census. When we're trying to count communities, when we're trying to count people, typically Black people, especially Black disabled people, are not counted. Maybe they live in rural areas, or they don't have a home address, they don't have stable housing, or maybe they don't have the correct form of ID or paperwork, and they're also not included in the census, which means that when that information is not collected, those needs are not met. So basically, my point is, when you're talking to anybody about how do you improve your organization, how do you improve reaching out to the community, accessibility needs to come to mind. Is this information accessible to a large amount of people in different languages with different needs? Is it easy to access? Is it free, or does it cost money? You need to really think about, is this available, accessible, and clear that the community can understand? Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. All right. So our next speaker is Councilor Jackie Leung. She is a Salem City Councilor, and as well, she is a candidate for Oregon House District 19 this fall. So.
Hi, everyone. It's a really nice evening today, isn't it? So I was invited to come here and speak about two different things, specifically the work I do on City Council and how to get involved, as well as some of my viewpoints on running for state. So to give everyone a little bit of background about who I am a mother of 4 children. They're not here today. They range from 18 months to 11 years old. I am the executive director and a public health advocate of a statewide nonprofit that provides support and services to the Micronesian and Pacific Islander communities. I have a background in public health, as well as doing a lot of work on healthcare and policy. So I moved here to Oregon 2011, so I've lived here now for 9 years. And it's been a very interesting experience. I came here initially to attend law school at Willamette University. I graduated from there in 2016. And when I was in law school, I had participated in a legal clinic on immigration law. And during that clinic, I had a chance to help somebody move their case from asylum to become a permanent resident. After I did that, it really ignited something in me that told me, I really felt like we needed to do more, that we had to do more. And, something I learned, especially when I was growing up, when it came to leadership and representation, I wasn't seeing it. Like, I had these people that would run that, I never spoke to them. They never spoke to me. I had no idea who they were. And it was very frustrating. And after that experience with the legal clinic, I realized, I wanted to get more involved with the city. And I looked to see what kind of fit based on my interests and my background. And I found the Human Rights Commission initially through the city. And it was a great experience. I had a chance to meet with other community members, other community leaders who did a lot of work. And, when it came to elections and I saw who was running, I really felt like, why is this person here supposed to represent my community, represent me? And I didn't feel like that person was hearing or understanding where I was coming from. I didn't like that. And, that was part of the reason why I ended up deciding to run. And, I knocked on a lot of doors. This was pre-COVID, way before pre-COVID. And knocked on a lot of doors, phone calls, did some social media, but it was primarily talking to people, hearing from them, wanting to learn from them what were their concerns? What do they want to have happen within the city? And I won. I've now been the city councilor this is my second year. And so far, it's been all right. I am the second person of color, the first API to sit on city council. And there are days where it's been frustrating, where I'm the only voice, the only person who speaks out or goes against what the council majority has votes on. But my commitment and my goal has always been to represent the community. So I was asked to talk a little bit about city council and how people could get involved. And so that's the first part of my speech. So some ways that people could get involved. I could speak about myself. I can't speak about other city councilors. Like for me, I read emails that people send to me. You could either send it to the generic city council email, or you could send it to me directly. Usually, if you send to the generic email, I may not respond because based on your address, I try and give respect to whoever that city councilor represents the areas, because I only represent a portion of the city. So I'm in Ward 4, and that's like south and east kind of Salem. So think about where Kubler off the I-5, all the way to Creekside, like some of that general areas where I represent. But it doesn't mean I don't respond to your emails. It's just like I want to give that respect to the other city councilors who's supposed to represent your particular area. But then there's some emails where it doesn't matter if they're in my ward or not, I will respond to them. I may not be able to have the answers that they need, but I try and help them find what they're looking for. So that's one way to be involved. Another thing to consider for me as a city councilor, I like to meet with people. Pre-COVID, I'd meet you anywhere. And now, because of these restrictions, I'm only pretty much, if people want to meet outside, masks, distance, all the things that we need to do to keep ourselves safe. I have a background in public health, so I understand that need to protect not only your health, my health, but also our families and other people that we interact with. I love the sound of little ones. Another way that people could become involved is think about the neighborhood associations. I sit on 3 neighborhood associations, but because of my work schedule, I only attend 2 of them. That's another way to get involved, another way to meet your neighbors, to express your concerns, as well as to advocate. And usually through those neighborhood associations could then also speak to the city councilor, who that city councilor also sits on. So that's one way to get involved, at least in the city. There are other ways to get involved, and I'm happy to talk about that after today. The other key piece I was asked to speak about was for state. And to give a little bit of perspective in terms of why I'm running for the state, like I mentioned earlier, I've been a city councilor now for 2 years. And in February, I attended a transformational leadership, a week-long training that was for Asian Pacific Islanders. And it really reignited that passion, that fire. I kind of was starting to lose a little bit. And when I came back, that's around the time when the legislators had walked out, and also when COVID-19 happened. And I was really frustrated by then, because a lot of bills that there was bipartisan support, meaning that there was support on both ends, for both the Republicans and the Democrats, a lot of those died. I mean, one of the bills that was important to me was centered around violence, domestic and sexual violence, and there was a lot of support and a lot of work that was done to make that bill happen. That bill just ended, and I was frustrated, and that's why I decided to file and run, and now I'm here as the Democratic candidate before you all. Provided I win in November, I'll be the second now Asian Pacific Islander to actually be on state representative for more than 10 years. So we need that representation. I was asked specifically to talk about education. And as you all know, with these restrictions that we have centered around COVID-19, we have no idea how education is going to look like for the fall. We keep hearing different conversations. We see different the school boards even issuing different statements. For example, in Salem Kaiser, there's 2 different choices for children who are attending public schools. There's this hybrid model where you go 2 days a week, and then the rest of the time it's online instruction, or you could do a completely online instruction. And I've been trying to get more information about what that online instruction looks like. And I haven't gotten enough information yet to actually know enough. But from my understanding, it still does not cover people who have children who either have IEPs, 504s, or children who have different types of learning disabilities or developmental abilities that may prevent them from accessing the education. My understanding, too, is that the programs are not designed for people who have children where English is a second language, or English language learners, excuse me. I mean, other considerations, too, is, people who don't have access even to internet. I mean, we got the rural communities, like House District 19 includes both South and East Salem, Turner, and Almsville. And some of those areas have very, very limited, if any, access to internet. So how are those children going to access internet in the first place? We also got people who are unsheltered. Like, they don't have a home. So when they get internet, so where do they go? They might have to go to a free Wi-Fi spot, but then how do they get there? They have to travel there. They might be outside of a McDonald's or some other building where they could tap into a free Wi-Fi spot until they either get kicked out or the internet gets shut down for the night. But those are some of the things that I'm hearing from the community in terms of what are the struggles, what are people experiencing. And it's frustrating because we are still learning about what's happening in education. I mean, education is one of my passions. As I mentioned earlier, I have 4 kids. So I'm seeing what's going to be happening to 2 of my kids. My 11th grader who will be entering 6th grade, and my 5-year-old who's going to be entering kindergarten. They're going to be on 2 different schedules. And for me as a working parent, how am I going to navigate that? And how about single parents who have to, work and figure out what they're going to do with their kids, whether their kid is home half-time, full-time, then they have to put that money towards childcare instead. Or are they going to hire a nanny? Are they going to hire an au pair? Are they going to hire a private teacher who's going to teach them at home? And then we're also hearing about some of the universities where the universities are going to be completely online. So if we're going to allow online university education for college students, Why are we telling the other children from at least kindergarten to grade 12, well, these are your choices and you have no other choice, and not taking consideration the impact it's going to have on the working parents or working caregivers. Other things that are concerning to me, in addition to education, especially at the state level, is healthcare access. I mean, we already are seeing what's happening within the communities. A lot of jobs are being lost, so people are needing access to healthcare. And access, what does it look like? Affordability is one. A second one is, can they actually get to the place to get healthcare? Thinking about rural community members, people who have to get to a doctor, how do they get there in the first place? When we had the shutdown of the public transportation and then having the requirement of masks and all those other key pieces, how was that message conveyed to those communities? Education, again, is a big issue for me. Another area is affordable housing. We're seeing the demand for affordable housing, but we're also not providing enough housing that's not only affordable, but also in areas where people could get to. And how about having barriers for people who want to be a home owner? And my partner, who just had walked out, I think he got allergies. We're finally going to own our first home after being a renter for so many years. We've had to go through a lot of barriers just to get to where we are to be able to have this home. And provided all that works out, we'll be moving in within the next 2 weeks. And we're excited about that. But how about the other people who can't even get a loan to even buy a home in the first place? I mean, police reform is another area of concern to me, and ensuring that we're already seeing what's happening in Portland. We saw what happened a few weeks ago in Salem. What are we doing, as elected officials? What are we doing as a community to address those concerns? Another area of concern for me is also our small business owners. How are we ensuring that our small business owners are getting what they need to be protected so that they actually have their business to come back to, especially as we are slowly reopening? My ask from folks here and from our viewers, get involved. Vote in November, that's one big thing. But, November is a few months away, so what are other ways that you could be involved? Well, for one, you can, if you have the ability and the accessibility to do so, you could get involved with campaigns. Some people have Facebook pages, some people have web pages. You could go onto their Facebook or other social media, like them. Mine is Jackie for Oregon, so you could just type that in, you could find it. You can like my posts, you can share my posts, you can interact with my posts. Another thing that you could also focus on is support with your wallet. So what does that mean? One of the big things when it comes to campaigning is finances, besides getting the word out and getting the votes. So by donating your wallet, that includes if you have $5, $10, any amount. If you're able to do a fundraiser, that helps. Or contact friends, contact colleagues, ask them to get to know me, and vice versa, so that we could build this from the ground up. So you could get to know me, I get to know you, and provided that you like me, from there, you can have a relationship and build things. But even if we didn't get along, but you still want to share your views with me, I'm here and I'm willing to listen. Other ways that you could provide support is to submit a letter to the editor, for example. Or if you're a business owner or a community leader, you can endorse the campaign. And that includes just, are you okay with having me share your name on my social media that says that you endorse me and what your role is and why you endorse me? Those are some ways to get involved from now until November. I mean, it's just not my campaign. There's other folks too who are running. I encourage you all to learn about them, learn about what they do and what their interests are and what their passion is. And if there's something that you feel that is not being heard, make it heard. I want to be able to work with you. I want to be able to work with everybody, but I also need to hear from folks. Like, what are your concerns? What are things that we can do together to not only make Salem better, but also Oregon better together? Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, we are approaching the conclusion. Two more speakers. We've got Jonathan Jones, owner of Epilogue Kitchen and Cocktails.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan. I, along with my wife, own Epilogue Kitchen and Cocktails. We're right downtown on High Street. We're kind of right in the middle of things. If you're traveling on High Street, you will see us because we have George Floyd in our window, and we have Breonna Taylor in our window, and we have words in our window that will stay there until change happens. It's been a pretty wild ride to operate a business for a couple reasons. Let me back up. So, storytelling. The name Epilogue comes from our desire when we started a business to have something that gave us ties to our literary backgrounds, our culinary backgrounds, my background with the very first book I read being The Rainbow Cake in kindergarten. Those things sort of stuck with me, I think. Reading, writing, cooking, telling stories. We started with a little shop called Prologue that we ran out of our various rental homes for a while. And then that evolved to a truck, and then that truck evolved to Epilogue, and Epilogue is now what you see and what you used to be able to walk into. One of the difficult parts is running a business within a system of economics that I don't personally agree with. It is hard to be in a capitalist system while you are at your very core not a capitalist. But personal freedom being the pie in the sky that it is, that was the only way that my wife and I saw to achieve that sort of personal freedom. That little piece of the story is one that's really, really common, especially amongst Black community. Trying to find real liberty and freedom within a country whose economic system was built on our labor and our blood is pretty Sisyphean. It is just rolling the rock up that hill. So that was difficulty one. Difficulty two, when George Floyd was murdered, was that we were in the middle of a pandemic, and we had been outspoken about our ideas of what should be happening as it relates to business and public health, and that had already sort of alienated us from a portion of the population. We're unwavering in that. We're unwavering in our message of inclusivity as it relates to Black Lives Matter and civil rights in general. All that is to say, again, back to the storytelling, that the story we're trying to tell here in Salem, which is the city that we happen to be in and love and are trying to make better, is that it can be better, but it is not. And that has been a point of contention with quite a few people. There's, I think, a disconnect when you say that you're trying to improve something with people who believe that means that you think it is not worth improving. And the reality is that none of us would be here doing any of this and trying to make our community, our city, our country a better place if we didn't love those things. I bring that up because I feel like it's really important to maintain that message and to not allow that message to be twisted. And as you might see right now in the coverage of what's happening in Portland, in the coverage of what's happening in Atlanta and Chicago and Detroit and basically anywhere where like large movements are occurring, there's a lot of spin going on that's trying to take away that love of community and love of your neighbor, and instead turn what we're doing into an us versus them, patriots versus anarchists sort of situation. And all of those words are way too loaded to actually be used. I'm using them as placeholders. So the point of bringing all that up is storytelling and education. We use food, we use the written word, we use music to tell a story and to attempt to educate about history, about current events, about emotional weight, about obligation. And I use we royally. It's Epilogue, it's myself, it's my wife, it is Black people. That is how our culture is communicated. It is through story. So back to sort of like what we're doing with the business. One of our proudest pieces is the little library that we've put together of Black literature and anti-racist texts that is available at the restaurant. You don't need to be a customer of the restaurant to enjoy the texts. There's sort of a soft requirement of a deposit just in case the books don't come back. But it's there to sort of push the hope that people will educate themselves and each other. And it was born out of a little thing we used to do when we were open in the before time called Chapter a Day, where people would come in at night and I would read to them for an hour. It's kind of a strange thing for a restaurant to do, especially for the main chef to do. And yet I did it because that is literature, education, storytelling are the main things to me. The food is it's great. I love food. But it's tertiary. It's not even secondary.
It was magical.
Yeah. Thank you, son.
It was magical.
So we can't do that right now because of the pandemic of COVID, which is on top of the pandemic of white supremacy. So we have two pandemics we're fighting, which prevents us from telling our stories in the way that we would prefer to tell our stories. We have the library. Right now we're working on a zine. It's very preliminary because I've taken on too many things. But this is one of those things that if other people want to get involved, we would welcome that involvement. It's going to be called That Also Happened, and it will be focused primarily each issue on an individual act of racial violence or importance in the United States. Salem as a whole, Oregon as a whole, is pretty vastly undereducated when it comes to race relations. Even things as far-reaching and global as apartheid are not, they're just not known about. And then we have a lot of history within the United States that's not known about. The MOVE bombings, Tulsa. More recently, we have horrific acts of violence on individuals that are only being brought up because of body cameras, which is another thing that we're getting to. But the zine, it's one of those educational pieces that I'm hoping to be able to get to a larger body of people. It came out of a conversation, actually, about a thing that Rian touched on, which was accessibility of the police misconduct complaint form, which I sort of started that conversation, and I believe Rian is mostly going to take that over right now. He's a pretty fantastic person, and I'm really happy to have gotten to know him. But there was a major accessibility problem with that form. It still is. It is a wall of text. It's hard to understand unless you are, a specific type of college educated, which is not most of us. And That makes it really easy for the police to say things like, well, we only got, 10 complaints last year. Well, of course you only got 10 complaints. No one knows how to do it. So out of that conversation about the problem of accessibility, this was after the library had been started. I started thinking about, okay, we have all these books, that's great. Books are intimidating, and books are not accessible to everybody. So how do we get the information that we need to get to the public in an easily digestible, time-friendly way? And we came up with 4 pages. It's going to be very short. There will be some text, but it will mostly be sort of a 3-panel comic style of education. And our hope is that, one, we keep costs down so we can print a lot of them, but also that information is distilled and easily understood and packs an emotional punch. Because without emotion, everything we're trying to do falls flat. So let's see, that was the library, that was the zine, that was the police misconduct form. We have a petition circulating for the demand of basically policy regarding body and dashboard cameras for the police. And when we started the petition, there were a couple things that I wasn't able to say because I wasn't sure where things were going yet. But the reason that we started the petition when we did and the way that we did is that the police union had reached out to the mayor and the city manager and asked them to start proceeding with basically trying to get funding for body cams. This is a pretty tried and true tactic by unions and police departments across the country to basically throw the onus on people who are trying to mandate accountability but who also do not want to increase funding. So they say, well, we put forward this idea, you said no, that's on you, our hands are clean. It's tricky, they do it all the time. And so my goal with the petition was to get ahead of that and to have an outpouring of community voices saying, it's messy, and I know there's a lot of reasons to want or not want. There's a lot of everything. But I refuse to allow the union to dictate that the way that goes. And that's why that petition is important to me. Because if we can get a consolidated voice, within the petition, I list out some things that we are demanding as a mandate, part of the rules and regulations, so that there would be accountability, they would have to be on, there would be punishment if it was off, there would be community access through freedom of information, there would be requirements for how it was stored. And without those things, which is definitely, and also that the funding for the cameras would come from the existing budget through reallocation. That's the piece that's most important. And that's the piece that they're definitely going to try and hang everything up on. And it's the piece that they always hang it up on, is the money piece. So if we have a consolidated voice saying, no, you're not letting it hang up on the money piece this time. You're taking some of the money, some of the funds that come from the Salem Police Foundation, I believe, is the organization that provides them with a lot of their militarized gear. They donate it, right? So they raise money. They provided them with riot gear, with some of their SWAT stuff. If they're able to do that, and that's not taxpayer money, that's separate. So if they're able to raise money for those things, then they're able to raise money for the cameras. And that money is already there. So the petition that we started is specifically about those couple of pieces. Accountability, not having it cost more money, because we're trying to remove funds from the police and divest them and redirect them into other things. It's been exhausting, obviously. All of us are feeling that. hold on, I'm missing something that we are also very preliminarily working on a family-friendly, kid-centric online event that would be focused on reading some children's books about racial inclusion and feeling yourself. But would also be there'd be a question and answer session where we would have parents have their children form questions, send them to the event, and then we would answer them. And so we are looking for a panel of educators and various other people who might be interested in that. So that's another thing that we're hoping to get some input and help on running that event, because a lot of what's going on inadvertently leaves out the kids, and I think that this, just remembering what I grew up reading and learning, I would like to be able to help sort of facilitate and pass that on to the young ones.
I just wanted to add to what you were saying about your petition and demands for the police department, that they should also have an independent group that does audits or investigations.
Yep.
There should be a separate independent organization or a group that does an audit of the police department, so that they are held accountable if they do have their body cams off, so there's actual accountability and punishment for those actions. And there needs to be an independent audit of their policies and procedures. So, for example, if they turn them off and they edit them and leave out parts of it, that they would not be able to do that, and that they would face, fines or charges or substantial punishment. And also, I know that some of them have an 8-hour limit technologically, so the police should only be able to have shifts that are 8 hours long, so that their body cams can be on at all times, that they're on their shift.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is a fantastic point. And to go with that, there's multiple levels. Right now, the complaint form goes to the police first and then to the community review board, which just seems a little like, yeah, we didn't do anything. It's fine. What do you think? So those are the things that we're working on. I rambled a little bit, but I also wanted to leave you with some requests and some, not cautions, but one of them is that, as exhausting as all of this is and as angering as all of this is, that you can't lose your joy, whatever that may be for you. It is so drastically important that you keep it, because when you've lost your joy, they have won. That is what they're after. They want, and by they I mean white supremacists, I mean garden variety racists, I mean people who have hate. What they want is for you to experience sorrow, and for that to be the only experience you have. They also want your life. That's a thing I would like for all of us to remember as well. When we're out there, we're at protests, when we're thinking about ways to be involved, the rules of life that you and I might engage in are not the same as the rules that they engage in. There are quite a few people on the other side of things, Proud Boys, 3%ers, some of them, various other groups. There's so many groups, and they all have ridiculous names. But remembering that they want you to stop breathing is really important. And I know that seems like it's a little dramatic, or alternatively, a little obvious, but I think it's not either of those things. I think it's something that we have to think about pretty actively, because it's not something that, if you are a compassionate, joyous person, comes easily into your brain. Those are not ways that you view the world. And so remembering that someone else might view the world that way, if you are attempting to change the world, is pretty important. Because I want to see all of you a lot more. That is not in any way to say not engage. And that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, was respecting a diversity of tactics, but also following your gut, following your instincts, and following ideals rather than people. That's a difficult thing to really like get your head around sometimes. But following ideals rather than people means that you stay like hyper vigilant of what the people who are around you are saying and what they're doing, and it keeps our movement, it keeps your movement in the right direction. It maintains inclusivity. It stops you from falling into a pit of, oh, all of a sudden I've followed this person and I wasn't even paying attention, and now they're doing something that, you know, I don't actually agree with. If you follow ideals, then you can check the people that you believe in, and you can make sure that they stay honest and they stay on the path that you want them to be on. And then the last thing along those lines is not to confuse confidence with authority. I have confidence when I speak. I tend to not use qualifiers like "in my opinion," because I feel like it's inherent. And I know a lot of other people who speak that way. And remembering that you don't have to do what the people you're following are doing or telling you to do if it doesn't feel right to you. And your instincts are like fine-tuned to help you stay where you want to be. So listening to them and listening to your instincts, not people. That's like of utmost importance. But confidence is not the same thing as authority. And that's I guess what I'm going to leave it with. Come get a book.
Can you say really quick about your event next Tuesday?
Oh yeah, forgot about that. So next Tuesday at 6, we will be, well, it was going to be on the Capitol steps, but I think I'm going to move it to the lawn for those safety reasons. But it's going to be in support of the body camera petition. I am hoping to get the mayor down there to see people. I'm hoping to get some other councilors down there to see people. And it was born out of the Salem Reporter recently published a piece basically starting the spin against body cameras, using funding as the vehicle of that spin. So propaganda is important, and we might as well try and start some of our own. So that's next Tuesday. It's a rally specifically to support the idea of a well-regulated, well-oversighted, is that a word? Oversighted? Sure. Body camera policy. And that'll be 6 o'clock at the Capitol.
All right. So before we bring in our last speaker, if you have the ability to, you're welcome to stay after. Just make sure to talk to people, whether it's the speakers or meeting some of the community members. I really appreciate everyone coming out. This will be available. I also, in terms of we've been live streaming it, but we'll also make it available on various platforms. I do have one ask of all of you. When you do go home and you think about today's event, if you have anything that stood out to you, any notes you took, you could send that to me. I'd love to share it with everyone who showed up. Maybe you caught something that was relevant to you at that time, but maybe someone missed it, but they can put that to use later. Or, it's something that we can begin to share. I did want to make one note on something that Jonathan did not bring up. He's been working with Councilor Hoy in an effort to rename Center Street, potentially after Martin Luther King, or name to be decided at this point. But that ball is rolling from the City Council meeting, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding, it's been proposed. It's now going to city staff, who will then draft an actual official declaration, and at which point it returns to City Council, and that's the real deal. That's when we start as a community discussing and get to a point where we vote on it and take action. Okay. So, ball's rolling. We're next City Council meeting is this next week. I do have an announcement about that. So if you are a Spanish speaker, or you do know someone who speaks Spanish and hasn't been able to take in City Council meetings, this next week they will be broadcasting it on CCTV's YouTube channel as a separate feed. So previously you had to request a translator, and then you would be given a specific Zoom link for an individual for you to go in. Now it's going to be readily available for everyone on YouTube. So definitely encourage more members of the community to take part. They are long meetings, but they are worthwhile, and a lot of stuff happens. So with that, Julianne Jackson is our last speaker, and let's get this. Thank you.
Hi guys, how are you? Wow, don't all get stoked at once, man. So, I feel like folks have relatively covered the bases as far as what we're working on. One of my major things is SROs in schools, just simply because I was affected by the school to prison pipeline. I know how it works. I was involved in it. It's heartbreaking. And it absolutely affects you into adulthood. There's also some new legislation, and I don't know how I'm going to get my hands into this, but I'm gonna. But there's new stuff coming about addiction services and decriminalizing, small amounts of drugs. And I think that's so important because it does disproportionately affect Black and Brown communities. Also, I'm trying to figure out ways to, because I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm actually in active recovery, and it not only saved my life, but my entire life is different, right? So, I would like to encourage more folks in the Black and Brown community to be a part of those services. And as Rian was saying, in respects to access, I think that finding and retaining folks in the recovery community who are African American or who are Latinx, that can kind of understand that racism kind of lives in our bones, and that's a part of our trauma. And until we can kind of work through that trauma, addiction is pretty tough to get through. And so that's some of the things I'm just trying to figure out how to get my hands in, and I'm gonna. I don't know how yet, but I'm gonna. I think today I just want to encourage you. I know that Salem has had some issues recently revolving leadership or lack of leadership, and I just want to encourage you to be an everyday activist. When this all started for me, activist wasn't necessarily my title. I had done some labor work. I had done some other things, but you can decide that you're going to be a leader in your community, right? Nobody has to decide that for you. Nobody has to elevate you to that platform. If you are leadership capable, people will see that. And I think we just need to really focus on whatever issues make you passionate and shoot for those issues. I don't think that we need to to be participating in either elevating or canceling people that are trying to do this work. I think it's really important that we understand that it's, you can be an everyday activist. It's not difficult. It's not, that's a lie. Sometimes it's very difficult. Let me take that back. But, it's, no one has to decide for you. You can find something that you're passionate about. You can go all in. You can be committed. You can show up. And I'm finding out that that's 99.9% of activism is just showing up. And letting your voice be heard, because that's really what diversity and inclusion and those things are all about is, you don't know my perspective unless I voice it. You won't know how I feel unless I voice it. And I think the more opportunity we have to hear a larger majority of people, the better. The other way that I think, is really important to just being, like I said, just an everyday activist is checking yourself. Like, I've had to do this on multiple of occasions. This is really difficult to do. I've had to deal with people calling me out, and honestly, your automatic emotion is to be defensive. Your automatic go-to is to be like, well, not me. I think I'm pretty woke, but I don't know everything, and I don't know what hurts an individual person, and I don't get to decide that I didn't hurt that person because I said so. And I think that's really like the major thing. I've been trying to work the word crazy out of my vocabulary, and that's really hard for me because I always say, well, that's crazy. Right? So I've been trying to and you'll hear me on lives do this. Like, I'll say, that's crazy. I mean, wild, because I'm really working on that, and it was someone who had the courage to be an everyday activist really and go, hey, we don't say that. That's not okay. And that doesn't feel good to me. Really my first instinct was to be like, what? It's a figure of speech. But that's ridiculous because I'm asking for the same thing, right? I'm asking for you to look at me and not, and see my color and know that I'm okay anyways. And so if that bothers, if that word bothers you, then what's wrong with respecting that person enough to just not do it? So then I started looking at other ways in which I was ableist, right? And I started looking at other ways in which I was dealing with people in my own community, because the Black community, I don't know if you guys know, but there's a lot of colorism. There's a lot of things that don't make sense. And, it's really important to work on that. I actually found, surprisingly, a dude at the Rotary Club told me about this. He said, he asked me if I'd ever heard of the Harvard Implicit Project. And I was like, no. So I checked it out, and turns out you can test how biased you are. It's pretty cool. And it's very weird, especially if you really think that you're a woke individual. I figured out I'm not as not biased as I thought I was. And I read these results, and I was like, no. Me? No. So I took it again. And then I tried to beat it like it was a game, right? Like it was like, no. And the facts remain the same. Like, my bias was absolutely real. And I really needed to sit down and do some work with myself as to why that was. And what I noticed was a lot of that was internalized racism that I'd grown up with. A lot of that was unraveling, like some feelings I had about people talking about my addiction or my mental health. So I think that's one of the most important things we can really do if we're going to decide that we want to work in our communities and that we want to do this kind of work, is really just be aware of who we are, most importantly, who we are not. And understand that we can all get better. We can get better every day. It's okay to say, I'm sorry. It's okay to acknowledge that you've made mistakes and do what you need to do to move forward and educate yourself. I've been in the LGBTQIA community for, I don't know, as long as I've been dating, and pronouns don't bother me. And I haven't necessarily immersed myself in that community ever. And now that I'm around it more, I'm learning about there's a wild variety of pronouns that I knew nothing about, you know? And I heard one the other day and I was like, that's not a thing. And I said that to myself. I was like, that is not a thing. And then I was like, yes, it is. They said it is. Who am I to say? So I looked it up. I went home. I educated myself. And that's as a member of the community. So that's as a person who's a pansexual, I still was like, no, not a thing in my mind. But I know that today, when I get that feeling of like, all I need to do is educate myself. And all I need to do is ask someone how I don't care if you want to be addressed as a robot. It's none of my business. It really isn't. And so I think it's just about common courtesy and respect. I think it's about finding the people in your community that are already doing this work. I see a lot of people, even myself sometimes, trying to reinvent the wheel because this movement is fresh. And there's folks that have been out here doing this forever. And they need our support. They need our money. They need our bodies. They need feet on the ground. NAACP needs a rejuvenation of membership. I know that. I'm not going to get too much into that, but it definitely needs fresh blood. We do have a new white ally group called Capital City Surge. I'm actually part of that one. They helped me organize the End White Silence event, and they also are hurting for folks. Equity by Design, Oni March Banks, she's been doing this work in the community forever. So when you hear folks talk about, well, you know, who can come in and actually teach us about diversity where it's not going to be BS? Because everybody's, you know, I work for, I'm a public servant, and I get a lot of those touchy-feely, like, make yourself feel good diversity classes, and quite frankly, it makes me a little nauseous. We need to get to having these tough conversations and figure out what real diversity is before we're in trouble. You know, so Oni March Banks has been doing this work in the community. Like you said, Luce has been heading the SRO fight. You know, Mano y Mano. I think, what's the other one? Cocoon. I mean, there's people in this community that are already doing this work and they don't have what they need to do it. So I think if you're really struggling or looking for leadership, those are really great places to start. And, you know, and obviously, like I said, look at the issue that you're looking at. Become civically engaged. I'm learning so much about my government. I've been in all kinds of meetings that I would have not thought to be in. I went to, actually Rian was in that one with me, the Community Review Board. I've been checking those out. I actually applied to be on that board to try to start getting involved there. I pay attention to the Salem Kaiser School Board meetings. I pretty much watch any meeting that now has to do with my government because I'm understanding the importance of how it affects my life every day. And that's not really something I was hip to it because I was part of the labor movement, but as far as me thinking it really affected me at all or could have an effect on systematic injustice, I kind of had lost hope in that, to be really honest. So, you know, this movement and the allyship that I've seen and the momentum that I feel has really kind of rejuvenated that in me as well, as far as civic commitment and what we need to do to make actual long-lasting change. And I know that there's this, you know, burn it all down feeling and start over. But the reality of it is this is going to be a marathon. It's not a sprint. We're not going to get to racial equality tomorrow. It just isn't. Unfortunately, that just isn't the case. So if you're wanting to do this work, understand that, like, this is not, I just got lucky and stumbled into something that I is my passion now. Like, I don't think I can really do much else. I've actually tried to go to work and had to come home because I was like, oh man, what's in it? You know, like, I love this. But that's not for everybody. But try to choose something that you can commit to, whether it's, you know, if you want to give NAACP $20 a month, but you don't have time, awesome. They need it. If you want to give your time instead of money and you want to go volunteer with, I'm going to say it wrong, I want to say it fancy, like Alluvium, you know. If you want to go volunteer with them and, you know, make a difference in your community that way, make sure that you're being committed, though, and that you're going to try to stick around. Because that's what they need is long-term commitment, you know, ideas, exchange of ideas. Don't get frustrated when someone has a difference of idea, because I don't know if you know this, but no one is a monolith for anything. So I am going to have different opinions than Ryan. I'm going to have different opinions than Jonathan. Jonathan's going to have different opinions than me. And just because we're black doesn't mean we all are in the same boat or think that we should be doing the same thing. And as long as we respect those decisions and try to come to some kind of a common ground, we're going to be okay. You know, we're going to be all right. You know, allyship is really important. I've noticed allies have been moving mountains for me lately, and putting me in places that I had no idea I would be in. And that's what we need. As far as people of color and black folks, we need your resources. We need seats at the table. We need our voices to be amplified. We don't necessarily need you to stand like right here with us. We just need you to get us in that place and let us do what we do. Because, you know, like I said, I've had seats at tables recently that I never thought possible. And it's due to allyship, quite frankly. So, yeah, since they kind of covered the local stuff, I just figured I would kind of just talk about, you know, just some things that I've been seeing in the community and some divisions I've been seeing in the community as far as leadership and as far as who should be a leader and who shouldn't be a leader and who cares. Find the issue that you're passionate about and go make change. Find something that you love and that you're going to stay committed to and go make change. If you were in this movement for a leader, you were in it for the wrong reasons anyways, quite frankly. And if there's leaders in the community that make you passionate and that inspire you and you like, and they, you know, they encourage you to do those things, awesome. Cool. But don't forget about your issue. Don't forget about whatever it is that you are. Oh, my son's calling me. Hold on, Bubby. You know, don't forget about the thing, the ultimate goal. So if you're here for Black lives and you hear that there's some commotion within leadership, understand that movements take time to progress. And to be really honest, a lot of Black people in Salem didn't even realize y'all cared. So it's going to take us a moment to get it together. And, you know, I think we just have to come to that conclusion, like, find what you're passionate about, get involved with it, stick with it, regardless, show some gumption, show some grace, more importantly. And that doesn't, not to say to tolerate any mess, because I don't do that, but you know, show some grace and understand that people are at different levels of awareness and understanding, and no amount of pushing or prodding or poking is going to move them any faster. It just isn't. No amount of putting down, no amount of calling out is really going to move a person past something that they're not ready to move past. So I think I just want to encourage you to be involved, encourage you to be an everyday activist. It is a thing. No one has to tell you. You can call yourself an activist right now. Right now. If you do things for your community, and, you know, if you do things for your community and you're actively engaged in making your community a better place, you are, in fact, an activist. And there are many of them in Salem. So I really appreciate you guys for coming, for being willing to be a part of your communities and to make it better. Also, one thing, the Google forum is up. So if you are tired of 8 million chats being open at all times for what's going on in Salem, the Google forum is up. I'll post that. I'll try to post it in all the chats and stuff. But basically, each issue or organization has a forum. If you are interested in loosening the SRO issue, click on that forum. We're going to start, as soon as we kind of start seeing our numbers go up and we start accepting people, because you got to get them to request and then accept them. As soon as we see that, we're going to start adding that information. So let's say you want to deal with the SRO issue. That's something you're passionate about. You can go to the Google forum, click on that forum, and it'll just drop down all available information. And as people reply, it'll continue to just drop down. And then there's settings to where if that's all you're interested in Salem, you can just set it to where you only get those email alerts. Or if you're interested in everything that's going on in Salem, then you can just let it do what it does. So if you know any organizations that want to be added to that, I know I hate the chats. I'm over it. I don't know if I'm old or what, but I'm just over it. I can't follow it. I don't know what's going on. There's like 900 messages between messages, and if you have a job, you're just lost. So if you guys would like that information, I'll be posting it soon. I just want to make sure the settings are correct on it so that people who are from organizations are listed as managers, and then I'll start getting that out. Thanks.
All right, that's it. Chat if you want, stay if you want. If you need to take off, that's totally okay. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for the marathon.
Okay.
So I didn't know you were running in our district. Yeah, we live off of and I don't know, are you still doing
Yeah, I think we're here. Yeah.
part of politicians?
Talk to me about that. It's so important.
Yeah.